Hello, this is another story I wrote in the mid-90s for the Doctor Who Club of Victoria's fanzine, Sonic Screwdriver. I think anyone writing genre fiction at that time couldn't help but be influenced by the 90s cynicism about government and authority figures. The X-Files, which I adored, remains the paramount example of that approach and heavily influences the following tale. Rereading this in preparation for the recording, it quickly became obvious my understanding of the geography of Whitehall and some of the history of the area back then was wanting. So, I've taken the opportunity to tidy up not only my more egregious errors, but also some of the grammatical infelicities I was prone to then, and frankly, still remain capable of today. And just in case anyone asks, no, I don't do vocal impressions. Consider yourselves fortunate in that regard. Oh, and the Brigadier says a naughty word. Sue me. And as a final side note, this story helped me get my gig writing for the Lethbridge-Stewart range for Candy Jar Books. The fact that Eve of the Fomorians, Travers and Wells, Rise of the Dominator, I, Alistair, and Birds of Passage exists is solely down to the editor of the range at the time, Andy Frankham-Allen, taking a shine to this bleak little piece of political manipulation. Sit back, relax, let me indulge myself. Here is Conspiracy. Westminster's crumbling walls brooded over the Thames, the ancient palace a reminder of a more violent age. Striding towards it, a powerful figure in a sea of slouching humanity, the Brigadier appreciated its defensive qualities. The high, thick walls, the grim towers overseeing the approaches from land and water. Westminster dominated the landscape with a glowering intensity that humbled the more modern towers of glass and steel rising around it. Thoughts of Westminster slipped from his mind as the Brigadier cut along the street, grateful to have left his driver, Corporal Bell, and her incessant chatter behind. His thoughts turned to his meeting with the new Defence Minister, and he scowled, terrifying a young man in a shiny suit into dropping his coffee. Stalking past him, the Brigadier, not for the first time, grumbled about the vagaries of the democratic process. The outgoing government had taken with it a compliant minister who the Brigadier had come to rely on rubber-stamping his requests. His replacement was a young Turk, a rising star in the new cabinet. Whispers had it that he saw defence as a stepping stone to the leadership. Cutting back on military expenditure was supposed to appeal to the new generation of voters, appalled by the carnage in Vietnam popped onto their flickering television screens each night. "I'll be damned if he rides over unit on his way to number 10, the Brigadier had roared to his attaché, Captain Hoskins, the day before, incandescent at the memo he had received from the new minister. Hasty phone calls to Geneva had elicited no support. Jean-Paul had made it perfectly clear that in the new political climate, the Brigadier was very much on his own. Crossing the road into Horse Guards Avenue, the Brigadier strode under an archway and entered the Ministry of Defence. A flock of civil servants parted around him as he flashed his identification and made his way quickly through the security gates and into the building proper. Impatiently tapping his foot in the elevator, he watched the numbers flick past. Stepping out into the hush of an upper suite, he walked into the office of the Permanent Undersecretary. The receptionist, a lush woman in a floral print dress, led him into a heavily wood-panelled office. Her knowing gaze made it perfectly clear where her interests lay. The Brigadier gave her the pleasure of a tight smile before closing the door in her face. Striding to the desk, Lethbridge-Stewart launched straight into the Permanent Undersecretary, whose hesitant smile crumbled beneath the Brigadier's tirade. "What in hell has gotten into you, Henry? The new boy's been here 5 minutes and you rolled over on his demands to cut my budget quicker than the Mary Rose." "Be reasonable, Alistair," admonished the startled Undersecretary, rising to his feet. £5 million isn't the end of the world. Some of those services are better left to the private sector anyway. Part of the election manifesto and all that. And if the election manifesto said that permanent undersecretaries should parade down Oxford Street in garter belts and stockings, I'm sure you'd acquiesce just as readily, the Brigadier snapped. The Brigadier stopped, biting down on a fresh outburst. He shook his head. "You know as well as I do that this is the thin end of the wedge. UNIT is in constant need of extra funds to update our responsive capabilities. And what about the Official Secrets Act? How can we function efficiently when we're forced to liaise with the private sector? What next? Ask the BBC to tag along next time we go on an operation? I'm sure David Frost would love to follow us around with a camera crew in tow. Brigadier, let me remind you that through me, you're responsible to the Minister, and through him to the Parliament and the people. And what the people want, the people get." The Brigadier went scarlet. "I can't believe what I've just heard," he said, slapping the desk with his palm. "Henry St. James, didn't you once say that the only useful minister was a brain-dead one? And that a flock of sheep could vote more intelligently than the British people?" St. James squirmed for a moment before something caught his eye. Sensing someone behind him, the Brigadier wheeled to confront a tall man grinning impudently at him. "Let me assure you, Brigadier, that all my brain cells are alive and well. To be honest, though, I have heard the occasional bleat sounding from my constituency. The smile vanished. "Please, won't you follow me to my office?" Without waiting, the minister turned and walked away. The Brigadier shot St. James a glance. St. James shook his head. Grumbling, the Brigadier left. Sitting primly at her desk, the secretary gave him a haughty look. The Brigadier's answering smile was as cold as ice. Striding behind him, the Brigadier had time to size up the enemy. Exercise had played a part in this minister's formative years. Too often he had worked with ministers and backbenchers who risked coronary failure on the way to the Port Cabinet. There was something different about this man, the Brigadier decided. Something, call it paranoia, itched in the back of his mind. The way the smile had abruptly vanished, leaving a smooth, blank exterior. "Like an auton," he murmured, then shook his head. The embarrassingly high number of ministers who had resigned due to nervous exhaustion had damaged the last government. However, his surveillance unit knew that only one minister in the new government was suspect. It was something that they could handle. The minister had seated himself when the Brigadier entered the office. Motioned towards a chair, the Brigadier sat, irritated at the way the situation seemed to have slipped from his grasp. For a moment, the two men looked at each other. Then the minister looked down at the open file in front of him. "I understand you have some grievances with the latest cuts to the government's contribution to unit's budget, Brigadier." Before Lethbridge-Stewart could answer, the minister went on. "Let me make it clear that we have been given a mandate by the British people to run this country on efficient lines. The waste endured under the previous government is a thing of the past. And does that waste and inefficiency extend to the activities of unit?" asked the Brigadier, a hint of steel creeping into his voice. "Indeed it does, Alistair." "I may call you Alistair, yes?" The minister smiled. "You may call me anything you wish, Minister. For the sake of harmonious relations, though, perhaps Brigadier is best." "I see," said the minister. He closed the file. "If that is all?" "It certainly is not," shot back the Brigadier. He leaned forward. "UNIT is a supranational body tasked with the security of the planet. Geneva may provide administrative guidance, and this country may provide the funding, but UNIT is answerable to me. Governments sail the electoral whims and fancies of the people, but UNIT is the rock on which Earth's security is grounded. We'll be here long after you have departed politics for the think tank and cocktail circuit beloved of so many of your predecessors to this office." The minister matched the Brigadier's gaze. Only a throbbing vein at a temple betrayed his fury. "I have the files my predecessor left me, Lethbridge-Stewart, and frankly, I'm surprised he wasn't committed to an asylum. I have never before seen such a fanciful collection of children's stories in my entire life. Do you seriously expect me to believe that this planet has faced all these... I can't believe I'm about to say it. All of these alien incursions in the last 15 years? Daleks? Autons? Abominable snowmen in Tooting Bec, for heaven's sake!" He reeled off the names with contempt. "Do you know what I think, Lethbridge-Stewart? I think UNIT is simply a front organisation, a body dedicated to facilitating the complete domination of Britain by the European community. I don't know how you managed it, but you convinced the previous government to hand over part of its army and a whole lot of its sovereignty to Geneva and Brussels. This is something that I can never countenance, do you understand? As Defence Minister, I shall see to it that England stands proud and alone against the continent. We remain a great nation. We will never, ever answer to anyone. Anyone." Sitting back, the Brigadier briefly smiled. "I suggest you save such stirring speeches for the campaign trail. Unlike your constituents, I am just that much smarter." "You damned fool," scowled the minister, half rising to his feet. "What you do, who you represent, you're a disgrace to your country and to the uniform you wear." "Listen to yourself," the Brigadier urged. "You're the one in denial." He pointed to the file. "Do you think all I've worked for has been at the cost of British sovereignty? I'm as loyal to Her Majesty and this government as you are, but my remit is larger than domestic politics. You're risking not only the security of this country, but of the entire planet." The minister snorted. Lethbridge-Stewart clenched his fists. With a great deal of effort, he relaxed them. Taking a deep breath, he surprised the minister with what he said next. "It's obvious that a simple meeting isn't sufficient to resolve the differences between ourselves. As such, I'm more than happy to invite you to Unit HQ, so that you can inspect our facilities and see the work we perform. Hopefully then you will understand what it is we do and why it is so important." "Oh, I understand what it is you do, Brigadier," the minister said. He paused, considering. "Nonetheless, I will humour you." He buzzed his secretary, asking her to check his diary. A gap for the minister was found which matched the Brigadier's schedule. Rising, the minister refused to extend his hand. "You can see yourself out, I'm sure." Lethbridge-Stewart stood, turned on his heel and strode to the door. He paused and looked back. "I believe you will find your tour very illuminating, Minister." "Extremely so." Benton ducked his head into the Brigadier's office. "Pardon me, sir, the minister has arrived." Hunched over a file, Lethbridge-Stewart nodded, dismissing Benton with a wave of his hand. When the door closed, the Brigadier shut the file and rose from his chair. He moved to the window behind his desk. Looking down at the minister's car, the Brigadier nodded. "This had better damned well work," he muttered. Hopefully Hutchins and the lab boys had rigged up his little surprise as ordered. Straightening his uniform, the Brigadier left his office. Standing on the steps leading up to the entrance, the minister waited impatiently. He looked keenly around, noting how the building stood isolated from the main road. Behind a thick line of trees, the muted sound of traffic barely carried across the broad swath of grass. "Lovely day for it, sir," inquired Benton, hovering at the minister's elbow. The minister condescended to acknowledge Benton with a nod, but kept his mouth firmly shut. Benton rolled his eyes at one of the raiding corporals, who barely restrained a smirk. Framed inside the huge doorway, the Brigadier nodded, acknowledging the minister. Stepping to one side, he motioned him through the doorway. As the minister made his entrance, the Brigadier called Benton to his side. "I trust that everything is in order." Benton nodded, a brief flicker of a smile crossing his lips. "Of course, sir. I think that the minister will find his visit instructive. For all our sakes, man, I certainly hope so." Saluting, Benton marched off. The Brigadier followed, a certain amount of pride rising within him. Benton was one of the old hands, one of the very few left from the original complement sequestered from the British Army. Thinking back on those days reminded him, yet again, of Yates. If Benton seemed to him a slightly errant nephew, then Yates made him think of the son whose potential had faltered at the last hurdle. "Damn you, Yates," he thought. "I need you now more than ever." The Brigadier drew level with the minister. "A potted history, if I may, Minister," the Brigadier said. The minister nodded. "Unit HQ stands on the ruins of the Scarman Priory, which burned to the ground in 1911. A distant relative of the family sold the land to the government in the early 30s to pay off losses on the stock market. Rebuilt from scratch to accommodate the administrative wing of C-15 during the war, it became Unit HQ in the aftermath of a series of incidents in the 1960s. As the Brigadier gave his talk, they turned a corner of the building. Catching his host off guard, the minister darted towards a set of doors, pushing them open with a shove. A door caught his attention, and before the Brigadier could catch him, the minister turned the handle and stepped inside. With the exception of an oddly empty corner, the room was stuffed full of equipment of all kinds, in various states of disrepair. Shelves groaned beneath hundreds of beakers and flasks. Devices, most of them disassembled, lined the various benches. Looking incredulously around, the minister's eye was caught by a strange, helmet-like device attached by a series of wires to a unit. Picking it up, he turned it every which way before discarding it with a clang. "A junk room," he said, turning on the Brigadier. "You try to justify unit's function, and you keep a room full of cast-offs and waste? This is really quite intolerable." The Brigadier scrambled to save the situation. He gently steered the minister from the room. "One of unit's first scientific advisors used that as a laboratory," he said. "And left it like that?" "The doctor is an unpredictable man. He did say he would return one day to clean it up." "Doctor?" "Dr. John Smith. Quite the most brilliant fellow." "John Smith? That is the most improbable name I've ever heard." "The least of the improbable things about him, Minister. Still, what unit did back then couldn't have happened without his advice. If you will, Minister, let us continue the tour. There are barracks attached to the west wing, and beneath lies the vault, in which rests—" "The vault? Sounds like something Hammer Films would knock together in 5 minutes. I suppose you have a battalion of mad scientists beavering away at some insane experiment?" The minister chuckled. "Perhaps you would like to see the vault, Minister. After all, I believe what we hold there justifies our existence." "Oh yes," said the minister, rising to the bait. "I'd like to see the hole in the ground 33 million pounds of taxpayers' money has been poured into. Very much so." The Brigadier managed a strained smile. "Very amusing, sir." Stopping before a large steel door, he punched a series of numbers into a keypad, then intently stared into a clear crystal ball set at eye level. There was a series of high-pitched beeps, then a heavy clanging noise as tumblers fell and bars shifted position. The Brigadier glanced at the minister. "Retina identification system," he said. "One of the most advanced in the world. I hear our American cousins have been sniffing around. I trust we can keep this little secret ours?" If the minister was meant to be impressed, he did a good job of hiding it. The door split and separated, and the two men stepped into a lift. With a jolt, they began to descend. After a few moments, the minister tugged at his collar. "Exactly how far underground are we?" he asked. The Brigadier noticed a trickle of sweat running down the minister's face. "Oh, about 10 stories, give or take an inch," he replied nonchalantly. "We don't want what we have down here wandering the green fields of England." The minister managed a tight laugh, stopping only when he saw that the Brigadier was being perfectly serious. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face. The door slid open, and the two men stepped into another world. 2 heavily armed guards immediately challenged them. The Brigadier held out his pass for their inspection. One man took it from him and swiped it into a reader. A green light and a pinging sound answered. The soldier nodded, handed the pass back to the Brigadier, and saluted. Returning the salute, the Brigadier produced the minister's pass. When that received the all clear, the guards parted, allowing the visitors through. From above, the minister heard a noise. Looking up, he saw two more soldiers stepping back into an alcove set into a balcony above the elevator doors. "What's their purpose?" he asked. "Them? If our passes flashed red, then those men have explicit orders to shoot us. If they don't, then the two in the balcony have orders to shoot them, then us. Now, Minister, if you'll just sign this." The Minister looked blankly at an official-looking form attached to a clipboard chained to a metal bench the Brigadier had already signed and expectantly held the pen. Taking it, the Minister read the sheet. "Pursuant to the Official Secrets Act." "What the blazes is this? I'm a Minister of the Crown. How dare you suggest I'd reveal anything?" "I really think you should sign, sir," the Brigadier said, looking meaningfully at the soldiers arrayed above and behind them. The soldiers had taken aim at the Minister. The Brigadier took a step away, underlying the seriousness of the threat. The Minister hastily scrawled a signature. They then passed through a series of doors, each with their own set of guards and progressively complex fail-safe devices. Then they entered the vault. The vault was a long room with a low ceiling which sloped off into the distance. Pools of light dotted the room. As the Minister moved forward, the Brigadier barred his progress with an arm. "I would like to point out to you those two plinths over there, Minister," he said, indicating two waist-high steel poles, topped by small red domes. "If anything should go wrong, or an escape attempt is made, both of those are to be pressed. I cannot stress that highly enough." "What will happen?" the Minister asked, the sinking sensation in his stomach telling him the answer in no uncertain terms. "There are 15 C4 charges set into the foundations of the priory above. Depressing those domes initiates an unstoppable chain reaction. Our chief sapper estimates something like 100,000 cubic feet of earth and rock will crush this room. What lies within these walls can never again see the light of day. Ever." The Minister felt something crack in his resolve. He had come here to humour a man he intended to move to a sinecure in a dusty back office. Instead, he had allowed himself to enter a paranoid's fantasy. There was no way he was going any further. Whether the precautions he had witnessed were designed to intimidate him or not, they were enough that he now actively considered breaking a dozen government initiatives his party had promised the electorate. He chose to ignore the tinny voice in his head railing against his weakness. He was about to turn back, but the Brigadier's iron grip on his arm pulled him remorselessly forward. The first pool of light held a steel slab upon which lay the burnt and torn remains of a silver giant, grill work covering its chest, a blank face staring blindly into the light above. "Recovered from the sewers between St. Paul's Cathedral, Minister. It took nearly 40 grenades in a confined space to bring that creature down. See how little damage has been done," he said clinically, pointing to numerous shallow scratches along the torso. The Minister nodded dumbly, but the Brigadier had already moved on. Under another light lay two more bodies, though these were recognisable to the Minister. "Good Lord! That's Hanning and Silversmith. We were told they'd resign their ministries because of ill health." "These aren't those men, Minister." The Brigadier stepped over to one of the figures and dug a finger under the jawbone. The Minister gave a cry of horror as the face peeled away, revealing a blank, crude-looking facsimile underneath. "Autons, Minister. They infiltrated the previous government some years ago. We believe that a fellow minister in your cabinet is a creature like this." The Brigadier acknowledged the Minister's look of shock. "Don't worry. He's under constant surveillance. We don't expect the need for a cabinet reshuffle just yet." The Minister's mouth was slack as he followed. On and on went the tour. Horrors from the imagination of a fiend lay before the Minister, creatures that shook to the very core his belief in the natural order of things. Great furry beasts with rending claws and teeth of steel loomed silently over him. A creature that looked as if it had been born in the sea lay on a slab, its form covered with great sucker-like protuberances. On a small dais, the head of a demon-faced gargoyle lay enclosed in crystal, banded with steel. The husk of some sinister pod lay open on another, inviting the Minister into a world of insanity from beyond the rim of the galaxy. But the greatest horror, the greatest evil, stood at the very end of the room. Bathed in a clear, purifying light was a sort of war machine, a squat, dome-covered monstrosity whose cracked casing revealed an evil, pulsing green light. Hypnotised by the impossibility of the nightmares around him, the Minister moved forward, drawn by the faint, bubbling hiss he heard issuing from within the dome. "Don't be a fool, man!" the Brigadier yelled, breaking the trance as he grabbed the Minister. "Look!" He pointed at the ceiling where a series of ruby-red beams lanced down into the floor around the war machine. "That thing was recovered from the grounds of Sir Reginald Styles' estate. There was nothing we had, nothing even the doctor could construct, which would—" Suddenly the lights flickered, dimmed, and went out. "Christ!" The Brigadier swore as emergency klaxons screamed into life. The Minister heard him run off, leaving him alone. The C4, thought the Minister. Oh God, he's going to blow the C4. Everything slowed around him. The Minister turned, his eyes tracking across the room. Dimly, he heard the Brigadier's footsteps crashing in the distance. Before him, Lit bloody by the beams from the roof, the minister watched in horror as the machine silently jerked into life. The stalk on the dome stirred and the iris focused on him. One of the sticks at his midriff feebly moved, then decisively jerked upwards. A bubbling noise, like the sadistic giggling of a demon-possessed child, drifted towards the minister. Light snapped on, piercing the minister's brain. Crying out feebly, he stumbled back, landing in the Brigadier's arms. The minister gibbered, pointing wildly at the war machine, which had returned to its dormant state. The Brigadier led him gently away, knowing that unit was safe, its future secure now that he had a pliant minister once more to bully into submission. "Democracy," snorted the Brigadier, dragging the sobbing minister away. As the doors slammed shut, the creature began to laugh, a metallic, bubbling screech of an insane creature gone mad.
You've just listened to another episode of 42 to Doomsday, the podcast that loves talking about Doctor Who. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Please drop us a line at 42todoomsday@gmail.com. We can be reached at facebook.com/42todoomsday. If brevity is your game, we can be found on Twitter at 42todoomsday. Please check out our blog, 42todoomsday.wordpress.com, where Mark and I occasionally have something interesting to say. Aside from iTunes, you can listen to us via Stitcher and Player FM. If you enjoyed listening to us, leave a review on iTunes. As always, thank you for listening. Have a great week. We'll speak with you again soon.